Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to be looking at Rudolf Steiner, some excerpts from his The Stages of Higher Knowledge.
Ooh, very interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a follow-up to
Mhm.
Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, his earlier book, and he gets into how we can develop, ways of understanding that go way beyond our usual everyday experience.
It's almost like he's saying that there are like hidden dimensions to knowledge
Yeah,
waiting to be unlocked.
exactly. And he offers a path to explore these, less familiar ways of knowing.
Hmm.
He actually outlines four distinct stages of knowledge.
Okay.
He starts with what he calls material knowledge, which is essentially the world we perceive, with our senses. So,
Right.
the feel of your keyboard, the sound of my voice, just the everyday stuff.
Right. And that's where most people stop, according to Steiner.
Yeah.
But he argues there's so much more. He describes three additional stages: imaginative, inspirational, and intuitive knowledge, each one taking us, further beyond those purely physical sensory experiences.
So what would these higher stages actually feel like? Let's start with imaginative knowledge.
Oh, like,
Steiner says that this isn't just daydreaming.
right.
It's about accessing a world of vivid images that come from within, not from external senses.
He even gives this example of what he calls a flame formation.
Okay.
Imagine you're focusing your attention on, let's say, a seed
Mm.
or a dying plant, and you suddenly perceive an image that looks like flames,
Whoa.
almost like a hallucination.
Wow.
And Steiner says this signals that you're, entering that imaginative world where perceptions
Yeah.
aren't tied to physical objects in the same way anymore.
That sounds fascinating and a little unnerving. Like, what happens to our
Yeah.
sense of reality in that stage?
Yeah, that's precisely where the need for a teacher comes in.
Mm.
Both Marie Steiner, in her preface to this book, and Rudolf Steiner himself, in another preface,
Okay.
talk about this, Marie emphasizes that a teacher provides a kind of anchor
Hmm.
in this new territory, someone, experienced in those realms to guide you.
Okay, so someone to help you make sense of these new perceptions and avoid getting lost in them.
Right. But interestingly, Rudolf Steiner's own preface is a little different.
Mm.
He actually downplays the idea of the teacher as an authority figure.
Okay.
He says a teacher should be more like a guide, someone who supports your own exploration and discoveries, not someone who dictates what to believe.
So think about it this way. Have you ever had a mentor who helped you see things differently? Maybe opened your mind to new possibilities you hadn't considered before? That's kind of how Steiner envisions a teacher's role in developing this higher knowledge.
It's like the difference between someone handing you a map versus someone walking alongside you, helping you navigate the terrain and discover your own path.
I like that analogy. So back to this imaginative knowledge stage. What are some of the potential challenges or pitfalls Steiner talks about? I mean, if your perceptions are floating free from physical anchors, doesn't that create room for error?
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting. Steiner says that in this stage,
Hmm.
our own desires and emotions can actually manifest as if they were external beings.
Oh, wow.
For instance, he says vanity might appear as a seductive figure, promising you amazing things, but ultimately leading you down a path of ruin.
It's like our own inner world becomes projected outward, and we have to learn to discern what's real versus what's just our own stuff.
Exactly. And that's where having a skilled teacher becomes crucial, because they can help you develop that discernment to tell the difference between genuine spiritual insights and projections of your own subconscious.
It makes you wonder, have you ever been misled by your own desires,
Oh, yeah.
mistaking them for something else? It's easy to get caught up in those internal dramas.
We all have. And that's why this imaginative stage, while potentially disorienting, is such a crucial step. It's where we start to loosen the grip of the purely physical and open ourselves to these subtler, more nuanced realms of perception.
Right.
But it also requires a lot of caution and guidance to navigate effectively.
So we've got material knowledge, the everyday world we experience through our senses.
Right.
Then we have imaginative knowledge, where our inner world starts to blend with our outer perceptions.
And that brings us to the next stage, inspirational knowledge.
Okay.
This is where things get even more abstract and, dare I say, musical.
Wait, musical. How can knowledge be musical?
Well, think of it this way. Steiner describes inspiration as a kind of spiritual hearing.
Okay.
It's not about physical sounds, but about perceiving the deeper meaning and significance of things. He compares it to hearing the inner nature of, say, a stone or a plant, as if the world itself is speaking to you in a language beyond words.
Okay, now that's definitely pushing the boundaries of my imagination. So it's like tuning into a frequency that reveals the hidden essence of things.
Exactly.
Okay.
But developing the spiritual ear takes work.
Mm.
Steiner emphasizes that you need to cultivate a deep inner selflessness.
Hmm.
He says that in inspiration, what you perceive isn't coming from those external objects,
Right.
but from your own feelings, and but purified and refined through some serious inner work.
So it's not just about passively receiving information, but about actively shaping your inner world to become receptive to these higher truths.
Precisely. And Steiner is actually pretty critical of what he calls materialistic superstition.
Hmm.
This idea that people are just born geniuses,
Yeah.
that these extraordinary abilities just happen. He argues that inspiration comes from a very specific kind of inner development, a
Yeah.
deliberate training of your feeling and will to tap into this deeper wellspring of knowledge.
Okay, so how do we actually train for that?
Right.
What are we talking about here? Meditation, special exercises.
Steiner outlines a process that might seem a bit paradoxical at first.
Okay.
He talks about cultivating a really strong feeling for truth and falsehood, for right and wrong.
Mm.
But at the same time, he says you need to practice what he calls economy of feeling,
Hmm.
denying yourself those knee-jerk reactions to external stimuli.
Wait, so you're supposed to feel more deeply and less deeply at the same time. How does that work?
It's about shifting your focus from the outer to the inner.
Hmm.
Let's say something happens that normally gets you excited. Maybe you're watching a thrilling movie or, a competitive game.
Right.
The practice is to notice that excitement, that rush of emotion, but without getting swept away by it. To experience it without letting it control you.
Hmm. That's a pretty challenging concept.
Yeah.
But I can see how it might help you become less reactive, more discerning, like building an inner fortress of calm in the middle of the chaos of life.
And that inner stillness, that freedom from being pulled around by external things, that's what creates space for a different kind of feeling to emerge.
Right.
A feeling that's rooted in the soul, not just the senses.
Hmm.
And that's where inspiration can really blossom.
It makes me think about times when a certain idea or truth has really moved me deeply, almost like a spiritual awakening. Could that be a seed of inspiration, a little taste of this higher way of knowing?
It's those moments of deep resonance when an idea or truth really hits you at your core. Those are the moments that point towards the possibility of inspiration. And Steiner believed that by cultivating that inner sensitivity, by training your feelings and will, you could experience that more consistently and profoundly.
So I've got material knowledge, imaginative knowledge, and now inspirational knowledge. This is incredible.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most mysterious stage, intuitive knowledge.
Okay, let's hear about this one. I might be blown away.
Well, according to Steiner, intuition isn't about vague hunches or gut feelings.
Right.
He's talking about achieving the highest level of clarity and certainty possible, emerging with the essence of another being.
That sounds almost like a paradox, to be both yourself and another person at the same time. How is that even possible?
Steiner uses the analogy of a deep friendship.
Okay.
That feeling when soul opens to soul,
Yeah.
and there's a sense of profound understanding and connection. He suggests that this is what it's like to intuitively know another being, to experience their inner world as directly as your own.
Wow. That's a powerful image. So it's not just about intellectual understanding, but about a kind of spiritual empathy, a merging of consciousness.
Exactly.
Wow.
And Steiner emphasizes that this requires a fortified ego, a strong sense of self. It's not about dissolving into the other person, but about maintaining your own center while simultaneously expanding your awareness to encompass their perspective.
So it's like reaching a level of understanding that transcends language and thought, where knowledge becomes a direct experience. But how do you even begin to develop that kind of awareness?
That's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore what Steiner says about the path to developing intuition and what it might mean for our everyday lives. Stay tuned.
Right.
So last time we were talking about Steiner's stages of knowledge, and we left off on the most intriguing one, intuition. Now, you might think of intuition as just a gut feeling, a hunch, but Steiner's talking about something far more profound.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It's like this merging with the essence of another being, experiencing their inner world as directly as your own. That's a pretty wild concept. I mean, how do you even begin to develop that kind of awareness?
It's not as mystical as it might sound at first. Remember those earlier stages we talked about?
Hmm.
Well, they're actually a kind of training ground for developing intuition. Each stage builds on the one before it.
So you're saying that going through those imaginative and inspirational stages actually prepares you for intuition?
Exactly. It's like climbing a mountain.
Okay.
You don't just teleport to the summit.
Right.
You have to navigate the foothills and the steeper slopes first.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say you've been working on those earlier stages, developing your imaginative and inspirational faculties. What's the next step towards intuition? What does Steiner say about how to actually cultivate it?
Well, he stresses the importance of what he calls ethical development.
Okay.
And by that, he doesn't mean just following rules or being a good person.
Right.
He's talking about cultivating a deep inner sense of love and compassion, not just for people you like, but for all beings.
So it's like an all-encompassing empathy that extends beyond your personal circle.
Yes. Steiner believed that this kind of universal love is essential for developing intuition because it breaks down the barriers between you and others. It allows you to see past superficial differences and connect with the shared humanity or even the shared essence in all beings.
That's a beautiful idea, but it also sounds really challenging. I mean, how do you cultivate that kind of love, especially for people who you might not even like?
Steiner acknowledges that it's not easy. It requires a lot of inner work, a willingness to confront your own biases and prejudices. He suggests practices like meditation, contemplation, and even actively seeking out encounters with people who are different from you.
It's like stepping outside of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
expanding your circle of compassion to include more and more people.
Exactly. And as you do that, Steiner suggests, something remarkable starts to happen.
Hmm.
Your perception of the world begins to shift.
Okay.
You start to see things from multiple perspectives, to understand the underlying motivations and experiences of others, even those who you might have previously judged or misunderstood.
So you're saying that this ethical development, this cultivation of love and compassion, actually changes how you perceive the world.
Precisely.
Wow.
It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. Suddenly you see details and nuances that were previously hidden from view. And that's what opens the door to intuition. Because when you can truly see and understand another being, when you can connect with their essence on a deep level, that's when intuition arises.
It's like that saying, to understand all is to forgive all. But in this case, it's more like to understand all is to intuit all.
That's a great way to put it. And Steiner actually talks about how intuition leads to a kind of deep knowing that goes beyond intellectual understanding. It's a knowing that comes from direct experience, from a merging of consciousnesses.
So it's not just about knowing facts about someone. It's about feeling what they feel, seeing the world through their eyes. But doesn't that risk losing yourself in the process? Like if you're so connected to another person's experience, how do you maintain your own individuality?
That's a really important question, and Steiner addresses it directly.
Right.
He says that true intuition actually requires a very strong ego, a strong sense of self. Because it's not about dissolving into the other person, it's about maintaining your own center while simultaneously expanding your awareness to encompass their perspective.
So it's like being two distinct instruments playing in harmony, each with its own unique sound, but creating something beautiful and complex together.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Right.
And Steiner believed that this ability to connect deeply with others while maintaining your own individuality was one of the hallmarks of truly evolved human beings.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of ethical development and cultivating love and compassion as a path to intuition. But are there any other practical steps that Steiner suggests?
He talks a lot about the importance of observation. Not just observing the outer world, but also observing your own inner world, your thoughts, feelings, and impulses.
So it's like that mindfulness practice of just noticing what's going on inside your head without judgment.
Yes. But Steiner takes it a step further.
Okay.
He says that by carefully observing your own inner world, you start to notice patterns and connections that you might have missed before. You start to see how your thoughts and feelings influence your perceptions and actions.
It's like becoming a scientist of your own mind, studying your own consciousness.
Exactly. And as you become more aware of your own inner workings, you start to see those same patterns and dynamics at play in other people. You begin to recognize the shared humanity that underlies all those external differences.
And that shared humanity becomes the bridge to intuition.
Mm.
It's like suddenly you're speaking the same language, even if you come from different cultures or backgrounds.
Yes. And Steiner believed that this kind of intuitive understanding was essential for creating a more just and compassionate world.
Mhm.
Because when you can truly see and understand another person, it becomes much harder to harm them, to dismiss their experiences, to treat them as anything less than fully human.
Wow, that's a powerful idea. So it's not just about personal growth and development, it's about creating a better world for everyone.
Absolutely. And Steiner believed that developing intuition wasn't just some lofty goal for spiritual seekers, it was a crucial step in the evolution of humanity as a whole.
Okay, so we've got material knowledge, imaginative knowledge, inspirational knowledge, and now this mind-blowing concept of intuitive knowledge. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But what does this all actually mean for us, for everyday people trying to navigate the world and make sense of our lives?
Yeah.
How can we apply these ideas in a practical way?
That's a great question, and one that Steiner himself was deeply concerned with.
Hmm.
He believed that these stages of knowledge weren't just abstract theories, they were meant to be lived, to be applied in the real world.
So how do we do that? How do we take these lofty concepts and turn them into something tangible, something that can actually make a difference in our lives?
Well, that's something we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at some concrete examples of how these stages of knowledge can be applied in everyday life, in relationships, in work, even in our understanding of ourselves.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. I'm ready to hear how we can put all this into practice. Okay, so we've explored Rudolf Steiner's 4 stages of knowledge, from the everyday material knowledge to the more mysterious intuitive knowledge. But the big question is, how do we actually apply these ideas in our lives?
Well, Steiner believed that these stages weren't just some abstract theory. He saw them as a practical framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about embodying it, right? But how does that actually play out in everyday life? Give me an example.
Let's take relationships.
Okay.
Imagine you're having a conflict with someone.
Hmm.
If you're operating solely from material knowledge, you might just focus on the external facts of the situation. Who said what? Who's right or wrong?
Kind of like a stalemate, stuck in that back and forth.
Exactly. But if you can tap into imaginative knowledge, you might start to see those hidden emotions and motivations driving the conflict. Maybe there's fear or insecurity lurking beneath the surface.
So instead of just seeing the words and actions, you start to see the underlying story.
Right. And then if you can access inspirational knowledge, you might begin to feel a deeper sense of empathy for the other person. You might start to see things from their perspective, to understand their pain or their struggle.
And that could lead to a more compassionate approach to resolving the conflict,
Yeah.
right? Instead of trying to win the argument, you're trying to understand each other's needs.
Exactly. And if you can reach that level of intuitive knowledge where you're truly connecting with the other person's essence, you might even experience a sense of forgiveness or understanding that transcends the conflict itself.
Wow, that's a powerful example. So these stages aren't just about intellectual understanding. They're about changing how we relate to each other, how we navigate the world.
Absolutely. And Steiner believed that applying these stages could transform not just our personal lives, but also our work, our communities,
Right.
even our approach to global challenges.
So how might that look in, say, the workplace?
Imagine you're leading a team
Okay.
and you're faced with a complex problem.
Mm-mm.
If you're stuck in material knowledge, you might just try to force a solution based on the available data.
Right.
But if you can access imaginative knowledge, you might start to see new possibilities to think outside the box.
You might come up with innovative solutions that wouldn't have been apparent if you were just looking at the numbers.
Right. And if you can tap into inspirational knowledge, you might be able to inspire your team,
Yeah.
to get them excited about a shared vision.
And intuitive knowledge in the workplace. What would that look like?
Well, imagine being able to understand your colleagues' strengths and weaknesses on a deeper level. You could create a work environment that fosters collaboration and creativity. You might even be able to anticipate challenges before they arise because you're so attuned to the dynamics of the team.
That's amazing. So Steiner's framework isn't just some esoteric philosophy. It's a practical toolkit for living a more meaningful and effective life.
And one of the most important applications is in our understanding of ourselves. Remember that idea of ethical development we talked about? Well, Steiner believed that by cultivating love and compassion, by working on ourselves, we actually create a ripple effect that extends outward.
So our inner transformation can actually contribute to a better world.
Yes, because when we become more self-aware,
Right.
when we learn to manage our own emotions and motivations, we become less reactive,
Mm.
less likely to contribute to conflict or
Oh,
negativity.
right.
We become a force for positive change.
It's like that Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see in the world.
Hmm.
But in this case, it's about becoming the change you want to see in yourself,
Hmm.
knowing that that change will ripple outward.
Exactly. And Steiner believed that this kind of inner work was essential for humanity to evolve, to
Mm.
create a more just and compassionate world.
So it's not just about climbing the ladder of knowledge for our own personal gain.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge to make a positive impact on the world around us.
Precisely, it's about realizing that we're all interconnected, that
Hmm.
our actions have consequences, and that by developing our higher faculties, we can become agents of positive change.
That's a really inspiring message. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Steiner's stages of higher knowledge, what's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that these stages aren't just some unattainable mystical states.
Mm.
They're within reach of each and every one of us.
Mm.
It takes effort, it takes practice, but the rewards are immense.
So if we're willing to put in the work, we can unlock these hidden dimensions of knowledge and experience the world in a whole new way.
Absolutely. And in doing so, we not only enrich our own lives, but we also contribute to creating a more compassionate and understanding world for everyone.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to start climbing that ladder of knowledge.
Me too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Rudolf Steiner's work. I hope it sparks some new ideas and insights for you. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.